Dear ladies and gentlemen, a very, very warm welcome to the inaugural session of the German chapter of the Climate Governance Initiative. I am delighted to have you and our guests with us today. My name is Werner Schnappauf, Chair of the German Council of Sustainable Development. The Council is honored to co-host the German chapter and today's session, together with our partner organizations, the ESMT Berlin, represented by its president, Professor Jörg Rocholl, and the Board Academy, represented by Katharina von Frankenberg. I would like to very welcome our speakers, Dr. Simonia Bajaltra, Chairwoman of Henkel's Supervisory Board, very warm welcome, and Joe Kaiser, Chairman of Siemens Energy's Supervisory Board, also very warm welcome. And Rainer Hoffmann, he is President of DGB, the German Trade Union Confederation. Welcome, Mr. Hoffmann. Ladies and gentlemen, let me briefly outline what we want to achieve, both with the chapter in general and with today's session. Supervisory boards play an important role in the long-term stewardship and overall direction of companies. The Climate Governance Initiative's global network aims at mobilizing supervisory board members to align business models with ambitious climate policies. To do so, the supervisory bodies must be provided to reliable, up-to-date information on the best way forward. I especially want to thank the World Economic Forum and in particular Silvio Dulinski and the Global Secretariat of the Climate Governance Initiative for providing us with this excellent platform for exchange and cooperation. What is the German Council for Sustainable Development? We are appointed by the German Chancellor to advise the federal government on sustainability policy in its broadest sense. What we can observe in our work right now is an unprecedented momentum for sustainability. The Climate Governance Initiative comes just at the right time to boost cooperation. We perceive three major global developments which we would harness for action. First, the challenge of climate neutrality has pushed itself to the forefront of national politics. Major powers, such as Europe, the US, and China, are currently adjusting their climate goals. The next 10 years are decisive for limiting climate change in line with the Paris Agreement. For this endeavor, it is absolutely essential to strengthen cooperation and multilateralism and to avoid geopolitical confrontation. When it comes to the climate change and the climate challenge, we are all in the same boat. Second, the European Green Deal has made climate neutrality as a quintessential element of European politics. By delivering the Green Deal, we will limit global warming and will set an example for the global community. But there is more to it. The Green Deal is the foundation of Europe's new growth model. It reduces financial risks and boosts competitiveness in clean technologies. It will create new business opportunities and millions of new jobs. The goals are uniquely ambitious, and to reach them, we require an unparalleled level of cooperation. We need you all, the individuals, local governments, civil society, businesses, small and large. We also need to forge new partnerships, especially with countries of the global south. When supply chains are made transparent and ethical, social, and environmental standards are kept, it increases the resilience of businesses. Last but not least, the current pandemic has well and truly reshuffled the political and economic landscape. It may be that the years to come will see a constrained fiscal space, but some good may come out of it. The pandemic has revealed where our societies are the most vulnerable. It is therefore imperative to invest in structures that will be resilient when future crises strike. We are perfectly aware that these unique times provide a unique chance for change. Rebuilding the economy must mean setting the right course for the decade of sustainability. However, it's all good and well to demand change, but how to enact it in the various and very specific settings is often a different story. I'm therefore very much looking forward to the insights of the practitioners that are our three distinguished guests today. If you, ladies and gentlemen, the audience, want to ask any questions, please use the chat function. Following all three talks, questions will be put to the speakers. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome our first speaker, Dr. Simonia Bajaltra. Dr. Bagal-Trah is highly esteemed as a decade-long supporter of sustainable corporate governance. She has more than 10 years of experience as chair of the supervisory board of the DAX 30 company Henkel. She steers a chemical and consumer goods company with a tradition of more than a century and has deep roots in the vision of the founding family. In brief, she's perfect to kick off our panel discussion today. Simone, the floor is yours.
Dear Werner, thank you very much for this very kind introduction, and also thank you very much for the privilege to share my experience and also my perspective in this forum. Climate change is no longer an abstract discussion. The last 5 years were the hottest years on record, and we are seeing an increase in extreme weather. Climate change is a serious threat to agriculture, infrastructure, health, and ultimately economic growth. By 2050, the impacts of climate change could cost the world economy $8 trillion. However, neither the pandemic nor climate change are the first challenges our companies face. And there are other pressuring issues too: the transformation towards circular economy, safeguarding human rights, and preserving biodiversity, to name only three. What helped us at Henkel to navigate the turbulent and demanding times in the past? Looking at our history, more than 140 years, both a strong company culture based on shared values, as well as the right organizational structure, were key. In the late 1950s, when poorly biodegradable synthetic surfactants in detergents led to foam piles on rivers, Henkel introduced regular ecological quality checks for detergents and household cleaners. The company started research into alternatives and the impact of its products on rivers, starting with the River Rhine on our doorstep. In 1972, Konrad Henkel made a clear statement that is still profoundly insightful today. He said, "I believe that times when the entrepreneur was allowed to focus solely on profit maximization and the health of his company are over." This year, we published our 30th sustainability report and can look back at 30 years of driving progress in sustainability since we signed the ICC Charter for Sustainable Development in 1991. To act now for tomorrow, to safeguard the long-term future of our business and the planet, is a central element of our culture. Our commitment to leadership and sustainability is anchored in the company's corporate values and the management of our company. The management board has the overall responsibility for our sustainability strategy. Our strategy, progress towards our targets, and key projects are regular items on the management board's agenda, but also part of our discussions in the Henkel Supervisory Board and the Shareholders Committee. On an operational level, our Sustainability Council steers our sustainability activities as a central decision-making body with members from all business units and functions in the company. It is chaired by Sylvie Nicole, Executive Vice President, Human Resources, and reflects all areas of the company. Mitigating climate change is embedded in the core of our holistic sustainability strategy, creating more value while reducing our environmental footprint. We focus our activities along the value chain on 6 areas that reflect the relevant challenges and opportunities of sustainable development. 3 focal areas, social progress, performance, and safety and health, describe how we want to create more value for our customers and consumers, our employees and our shareholders, and for the society in general. In the other 3 focal areas, we want to reduce our environmental footprint with water and wastewater, materials and waste, and energy and climate, the main focus of this forum. In these areas, we have set ourselves ambitious targets. We are committed to reduce the carbon footprint of our operations by 75% from 2010 to 2030 and have the clear ambition of becoming climate positive by 2040. We will continue to reduce our energy consumption, switch to renewable electricity and fuels, and ultimately supply surplus carbon-free energy to third parties. But we are not just focusing on our own operations. We want to drive progress along our value chain, reducing the carbon footprint of raw materials and leveraging our brands and technologies. During the 10-year period until 2025, we want to save 100 million tons of CO2 together with our consumers, customers, and suppliers. With our targets, we show our strong commitment to the Paris Climate Agreement. In March 2020, the Science Based Targets initiative confirmed that our climate targets are in line with the ambition to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. We are convinced that our focus on sustainability and our unwavering commitment are more important right now than ever before. The need to address the world's most pressing sustainability issues, from climate change to safeguarding human rights, has never been greater. At the same time, business partners and consumers are displaying increasing interest in sustainability-oriented products and solutions. Among investors, interest in sustainability is growing, and politics, especially here in Europe, is increasingly focusing on sustainability, for example, with the Green Deal. Therefore, I'm convinced that companies need comprehensive sustainability strategies and strong governance to ensure their license to operate and to capitalize on the opportunities of the comprehensive transformation towards sustainable development ahead of us. Successfully managing sustainability will support growth, help to increase cost efficiency, and reduce risk. Getting the recognition for these efforts requires transparency. When we published our first environmental report in 1992 that reviewed the progress made and showed the problems yet to be solved, we were among a dozen or so pioneering companies. Today, sustainability reporting is commonplace, expected by investors, and for an increasing number of companies, even legally required. These requirements will further increase in the coming years. Therefore, it is clear that climate change and sustainability overall will become increasingly important issues, not just for the management of our companies, but also for the members of supervisory boards, for the benefit of their companies and our common future on this planet. Thank you very much for your attention.
We thank you very, very much for that strong commitment. Simone, you mentioned the transparency and the non-financial reporting became commonplace, you said. At the same time, there seems to be much dissatisfaction. Companies complain about the burden of increasing reporting requirements. Stakeholders, even investors, see the need for more and better information. You spoke about that. From your 30 years of experience, what needs to change in future?
First of all, I think we all have to accept that sustainability is complex. Communicating as well as assessing a company's sustainability performance requires additional efforts. Comparing two companies or two products to make it more tangible based on price and performance is clearly easier than if you also have to consider multiple environmental and social aspects, and that along the value chain. Secondly, we need to get better at balancing different interests. Sustainability or non-financial reporting has to serve the needs of many stakeholders with different interests, not just investors. At the same time, stakeholders also need to accept that reports cannot cover all the information they would like to see, but needs to focus on a common ground of material topics. Here, standardization would help. We currently have too many partially competing and complementary initiatives, often focusing on single issues or needs of a specific stakeholder group. At Henkel, we need global and comprehensive standards. We operate worldwide and have financial and non-financial stakeholders around the world. And last but not least, it would really help if more actors would actually use the information. In sustainability, transparency and reporting are too often seen as just a value in itself. Too many stakeholders ask for information, but are sometimes either unwilling or unable to use this information. I'm convinced that the use of information will be key to driving the availability, quality, and materiality of information. This, by the way, does include all of us here. We should not delegate the lecture of reports solely to rating agency and financial auditors, but do it also by ourselves.
Do it by ourselves. Thank you very much. You are a perfect example for doing it by yourself. Thank you very much, Dr. Bajaltra, dear Simone. Now I want to hand over to the next panel. I'm happy to say the floor is yours, dear Katharina von Frankenberg. You are representing the Board Academy, and we are looking forward to your statement. Katharina.
Yes, thank you very much, Werner, and thank you very much, Simone. It was very insightful, extremely insightful. Thank you for that. And yes, I'm delighted to share a couple of thoughts and insights from our recent research. And I'm, as Werner already mentioned, representing the Board Academy and in the German chapter. And our objective of the Board Academy is to generate an inspiring discussion and build a network amongst supervisory board members and support the education on that level as well to achieve a really good corporate governance and sustainable corporate governance. And the three founding members of the Board Academy, Egon Zehnder, KPMG, and McKinsey, are really strongly supporting this because we know that it's really important that the discussion needs to go beyond profit and really in the sustainability area going forward. And probably laying out a couple of our most recent questions that we are concerned about is there actually a connection or correlation between the diverse composition of supervisory boards and the effectiveness regarding the sustainability and climate protection and the discussion? And second question, is the discussion on that topic already bold enough? And we all know that that's a matter of culture, and culture, it makes the difference, as it allows the excellent leaders to show their true selves and to be curious and authentic and keen to develop themselves and the organization. And we know that change cannot happen or cannot achieve without a cultural change. So we should look where are good examples for positive reinforcement to accelerate cultural change. How do we get from the thinker? Well, we know that we understand that these changes are necessary, but have we thought about X, Y, and Z to a matter of our hearts of the stakeholders? And actually looking back in the last couple of years, without the generation on the streets triggering our emotions, we would not have the regulations we have today in Germany. And also looking at Corona, we would not have seen the impact of less business travel and the positive impact on personal well-being despite being still successful in business. So we define emotional target pictures, call it purpose, and enable our positive and passionate change. In addition to this, let's take a look at the question correlation between diverse composition of the boards and the effectiveness on sustainability. We actually published today a study, Egon Zehnder together with the University of Göttingen, and it's an empirical study looking at over 500 listed European companies, looking at actually those questions. And it provides evidence that companies with a higher proportion of women in the supervisory boards have an environmental and social performance that is 6 percentage points higher than the average. And the same applies to age and the term of the mandate. So supervisory boards with the youngest members and the shortest terms on boards show a better performance over 7 percentage points compared to the average. So this is shaping culture, and you can shape the culture from above or bottom up, but both have their limits. So we see a rolling top down and bottom up interaction as the most effective approach. And every contribution by everyone must be openly received. Decision-making freedom for each individual promotes the joy of innovation and adaptation, and we need this for a bold discussion. So supervisory boards should actually be aware of this important process and encourage the executive leadership to be open and initiate cultural change. And I would like to quote a board member. He used an accurate image on one of our Board Academy roundtables. She described the supervisory board members as the nail on the CEO's chair to keep them moving. Another important measure is to provide for sufficient time on board meetings agenda and to allow for the competent discussion on sustainability. So supervisory boards can critically question its own efficiency through either self-assessment or external effectiveness checks, and check and decide and implement measures to improve. This also includes the question of whether the allocation of tasks between plenary sessions and committees is properly distributed. In Germany, committees can be established for topics with high importance. However, the formation of such explicit sustainability committees on supervisory boards is not yet widely seen in Germany. And this European study that I was mentioning before shows actually that the existence of sustainability committees with the appropriate expertise on board has a significant impact on the environmental and social performance, and exceeding the average of the sample by 13 percentage points. So in Germany, we see a couple of voluntary sustainability councils, for example, in the automotive industries and some others. However, they're outside of the required corporate governance structure, and not within the supervisory board. Looking at the DAX 30 companies, it's only one company that has established an explicit sustainability committee, while 2 others have formed a combined innovation, respectively, strategy and sustainability committee. So establishing a committee doesn't mean that only this part of the supervisory is responsible for the topic and the rest is precluded from it, but the common responsibility remains untouched. Nevertheless, it emphasizes this important topic. So it could be a worthwhile and desirable goal at the end of this now more intense discussion to see a significant increase in the number of explicit sustainability and climate protection committees, expressing the importance of sustainability and achieving a thoroughly anchored and sustainable corporate governance. A couple of thoughts from our side. And now I'm delighted to introduce Joe and welcome you to the panel. It's great to have you here. And I would like to provide a couple of introductory words, although it might not be necessary as many many will know you, but let me introduce you nevertheless. So Joe, you started your career with Siemens more than 40 years ago, became CFO in 2006 and CEO in 2013. You handed over your CEO responsibility to your successor earlier this year. And we know you as one of the most outspoken CEOs in Germany. So you employ foresight for long-term planning from a business perspective, and clearly take on social responsibility, both with courage and stamina. So you serve on several supervisory boards now, on Daimler, Mercedes-Benz, NXP Semiconductors, but you're also the chair of Siemens Energy, and a company that's focusing on renewable energies, driving the transition to sustainable, reliable, and affordable energy. And it operates globally along nearly the entire energy value chain and employs 91,000 employees worldwide. And with your share or your stake, the 67% stake in Siemens Gamesa, you're one of the global market leader in renewable energies. Right? So very warm welcome to you. And we would now love to hear your perspective and experiences and insights as chair of Siemens Energy. How do you plan to steer the transformation of the company and as well the alignment with the other ESG goals? And how can the supervisory board can boost this transition? And what are the challenges around that?
Well, thank you very much, Katharina, for this very kind introductions. Hardly hear that very often, so thanks again. And also thank you for the insights on what you have been, finding out on the effectiveness of supervisory boards, given diversity and other areas of expertise. I think that's really important, and we have a long way to go. I believe on average a long way to go from the traditional approach which we used to have to what I believe is necessary over time. We talk about the dual board system and sustainable corporate governance. I believe this dual board system already sort of contributes to ESG, predominantly to the S and the G of the whole system. Think about the two-tier system on governance, which I believe is, if it's done right, is a very, very important difference as to the one-tier systems where you have management and the boards commingling and sometimes, getting too close to each other as to what good governance is all about. The second topic, the S part of the ESG, I mean, in the end, the involvement of the workers' representation, is a very important matter on social governance. Now, obviously, we understand that sometimes they are in a catch-22 because they are being elected by the German workers and have the responsibility for the global headcount, but still, this interactive dialogue, this modern way of social interest, I believe it's a very valuable support if it's done right. And one thing I guess needs to be clear to all of us, that ESG is not a fashion, not something which, comes and goes and is in today and maybe out tomorrow because somebody else is coming alongside, the corporate and the social interest. ESG is here to stay, and it's only the beginning of what I believe is a trend and a reality which will, take a lot of efforts going forward. This is about sustainability and the planet, of course, but it's much more a societal matter. Many, many people, still are in this mantra of saying the business of business is business. Or in other words, the management does business, creates shareholder value and stays out of any other things which matter to companies. And that what might have been right in the 70s when Milton Friedman was, creating that saying that the business of business is business. Latest today, it's outdated. And even this stakeholder discussion about, well, we've got the customer, we've got the employees, and we've got the shareholders, still true, but there is a very, very decisive addition to those stakeholders. And that decisive addition is society. And at the very end of the day, society gives us the license to operate. Or in other words, companies which do not create societal value have actually no purpose to exist. What for? actually. And that's something which, you know, is in a big discussion all over the world. Europe has always been close to stakeholder approaches. In the United States, you've seen the shareholder value being still a very dominant matter. But even today in the US, you see a much closer, you know, alignment of top companies, be it in a Dow Jones, in a NASDAQ or S&P 500, you know, who look into the stakeholder value much more. They call it stakeholder capitalism. We've seen good examples, for example, in Walmart, which has been famous for the lowest wages ever on average. Now they say, hey, let's go look into minimum wages. Massive changes. And even top investors, think about BlackRock, the largest investor at all in the world. Larry Fink issues his letters to CEOs all the time, and more you see the sustainability, the governance, the social aspects taking room in his letters. But then you also see the other examples. For example, you know, Danone, Emmanuel Faber, a good friend of mine, who's been really pushing hard on stakeholder capitalism. And even at Unilever, you know, they lost the jobs because they, you know, were too close to social stuff. So shareholders eventually stepped in, activists stepped in and got them out of the job. So the question is, what the hell is going on? Are we right or are we wrong, or who's actually calling the shots going forward? Well, there is one extremely important difference, and that is really relevant to if you look at ESG and board tasks. If your performance is not up to relative peers, don't even start thinking about ESG. Don't even think about it. Get the basics right first. You know, have a good performance, be up to par with at least your peers, preferably better than the peers, but be at least up to your peer performance. Otherwise, you know, it's a very short-lived approach to go into matters like purpose, which is, you know, the discipline at the end which makes the difference. And I always say, you know, if your relative performance to peers is no good, don't get started with discussions about purpose and any other things, because it's just not sustainable. Or in other words, kill the dragon first before you go after the princess. And that's really relevant, because if that is not in order, you know, all the good things is not that great, because it will at the end not prevail. And that's basically what we have been, you know, doing in our company. When I was still CEO at Siemens AG, you know, fix the basics first. Make sure that you perform at least as well as your competitors, preferably better. And then go after the princess, then go after the real value of what a company can provide. And that's very important, because sometimes people say, oh, well, performance may be long-term, but short-term, I jump to something else. Not going to work. It's just not going to work out of many reasons. So there's many levers what you can do as a supervisory board, because obviously, as we all know, in Germany, you know, management does management and supervisory board does, as the Germans say, two things: Aufsichtsrat. Aufsicht means governance, not always basic democratic. You know, there is rules to play and rules to obey to. And the second topic, the Rat, giving advice, you know, it's relevant in that area. So I could go on and on and on to many things which I have seen in my careers on both sides of the table, management as well as supervisory board. As you have mentioned, I've been in NXP and in Daimler and now in Siemens Energy. But I want to highlight maybe three things which are really relevant as to how a board can support ESG going forward. First one is we need to align our personnel decisions, people development in ESG. If that one, you know, if you don't start from the top, never going to work. Cultural change, you know, can be embraced from the grassroots, younger people who wants to get some changes. Yeah, maybe, but typically it goes from the top to the bottom if you live it by example. If you just, you know, issue 100,000 corporate circulars, how we're going to do things differently next time, it's just not going to work. People want to see and hear of what the bosses do. and how they do it and how they stick to their word. So personnel, get the right people in place is really relevant. That same is true for supervisory board selection. And we just have been going through that process, as you know, with Siemens Energy. And we said, look, we need to have domain know-how. So people need to sort of understand a little bit, the energy sector, the transformation, the tasks, the priorities. But you also want to make sure that there is enough diversity in both diversity of experience, diversity of international standards, and of course the diversity on gender, which has also let's say, a legal matter to adhere to. And I'm glad to report that involving all those three matters, we have got 40% of our people in the shareholder representatives who are female. Is that enough? No, it isn't, but it's a good start. And we need to push the ethnical diversity much more than we have done so far, because that becomes more and more relevant. Just think about the whole matter of Black Lives Matter and the like. So ethnical diversity is the next thing to go. And this is really important. So then management, same thing, align the strategy and the values as to what management does. Because at the end of the day, people talk a lot about being heard and forgotten. If people do things, they will be remembered in what they have done and how they have done it. Give you two examples. The Siemens Energy Executive Board says, look, we are going to go out of coal, effective immediately, not taking any new bids on coal-fired power plants. However, we are going to be a reliable partner for the ones who have been contracting with us, because this is also relevant to our customers to be a reliable partner, otherwise it doesn't work. So get out of it, but be reliable as to what you have promised to your customers. If I ask the Fridays for Future people, well, they say, go to hell with your contractual obligations because we don't want you out. Well, fine, but then if I say, dear customer, I changed my mind, I go on the street on next Friday, they will say, look, what are you actually here for? You just lost your license to operate because you're not a reliable partner and you better than not exist going forward. The other topic, of course, is there's got to be goals. Simone has been elaborating to that. In 2015 already, 2015, Siemens pledged to be hydrocarbon neutral in 2030 and cut the emission in half by 2020. So 2020, we've done it. Now we split the company and we maintained the goal on carbon neutrality by 2030. So that's, of course, relevant, and we need to go measure it every year just to make sure that we are on this way going forward. And then the other thing is, of course, striking the balance between the doable and the desirable. Of course, we want to get out of coal as much as we can. Of course, we want to go all renewable energy, but then, there are 90,000 jobs and 2/3 of them depend on conventional. So we need to find a way and help those people to find a perspective going forward, although we'd rather go quicker than we can. So the second topic is second topic I want to mention is align the incentive systems to your values. Make sure that management's got non-financial targets on ESG and make sure they are measurable, and also make sure they are going to be long-term. Don't put ESG targets into the annual bonus. That's not going to be a good idea. This is a long-term matter, about hydrocarbon, about diversity, about the way we act with our employee satisfaction and the like. This is really crucial long-term. And then if you really want to involve the shareholders, which you should, then why don't you tie the shareholder interest, means the share price, into the benefits? So the way we've done it, we have long-term ESG goals for all the managing board and the top 100 managers. And then after 4 years, the performance measurement is being done, and the bonus is being paid by shares. So everybody is involved going forward. Third topic, and then I think I'm going to cut it. The third topic, and this is really relevant, and I've been mentioning it along the journey. We need to stand up and defend the values of society. Not just say, I don't care about people, I don't care about society, I'm only Siemens, I'm only energy and everything else. Let them go to hell. That's not the way society looks at us. People want to know, what big corporations do and what they think. Our employees want to know what the bosses think. When I was getting more actively involved in, standing up for openness and the liberal ways, and go after people who, were racist and other things. I was wondering what is actually the legitimacy that I do that. Shouldn't I just, take care of my own business, which is a lot of work? Or, who actually gives me the legitimation to speak up on values, on cultural matters, on anti-Semitism and the like? Well, shareholders, the shareholders probably would want me to stay out of it and just deliver on what I promised. Customers, well, maybe not. So I asked my employees and said, what do you think? Should actually your CEO speak up on racism or things like that, on treating people, on refugees? And so we did an online survey, and 89% of about 7,000 people who have been responding said, no, we want you to speak up. We want to know what you think. And then we can make our own judgment on whether or not you are the right CEO for me to work for. That's a very, very good thing. So I believe speaking up on the company's values and interests is relevant. Although sometimes they're hard to align. Think about the jobs and renewable energy, which is a discrepancy. It's not always easy, but I do believe this is a must. Societal engagement is very relevant to board members as well as to management. And if you do all that, I believe ESG has a good future in the corporate boards anywhere in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very, very extremely interesting insights. And actually the involvement of employees is actually the great already to introduce now probably the next speaker. So I would hand over to Jörg and to introduce Werner.
Yeah, thank you very much, Katharina. And we as ESMT, we're delighted, excited to be part of this initiative alongside our distinguished partners, the Board Academy and the German Council for Sustainable Development. Indeed, the German board system is unique. It is unique in having the 2 tiers. It's also unique in having the co-determination. And the co-determination, when you think of this in abstract terms, could go in different ways. It could go in the way, this is what studies have shown, that given that we have a stakeholder capitalism, as Joe Kaiser just said, it could actually even help the fulfillment of climate and governance and sustainability goals. At the same time, it might also be possible, as some reports have argued, that potentially there is a trade-off between job security and environmental protection. So therefore, we are extremely delighted, and probably we couldn't find a better person to deal with this question than Rainer Hoffmann, the president of the DGB, as Werner Schnappauf had already indicated. And in light of time, I would like to hand over to you, Mr. Hoffmann. The floor is yours.
Yeah. So, the microphone should work. Thanks very much for the invitation, and dear Mr. Schnappauf, as you have invited me a couple of weeks ago, it was a pleasure for me to agree to be part of this webinar. And as Mr. Rocholl said, we have a very special system of co-determination with workers' involvement, but let me start to underline, this is not unique. Out of 18 member states in the European Union, we have different types of workers' involvement and even systems which are going much beyond what we are knowing in Germany, for example, in Sweden or in Denmark. But this is a detail, perhaps we can come back to it. Let me first of all to underline that for sure that also trade unions are very much committed if it comes to combating climate change. This is one of the biggest challenges of our time, as other speakers have underlined. Trade unions work also for ambitious climate policy and, as we call it, just transition, focusing on the protection of natural livelihoods, decent and co-determined work, and equitable prosperity. The DGB is committed to the international climate targets. This is for sure, but it's not enough simply to agree on the targets. It will become even more important to define how we will reach the targets. And therefore, we have to take employees into consideration. As Joe Kaiser said, it's a long way we have to go. And it is ambitious, and we have to take workers on board if we don't like to take the risk that workers perceive this as a threat, and that could create or could generate resistance, and therefore, once again, only just transition can be a successful one. What does it mean? That means giving workers a voice in the process, recognizing them as drivers of change, and thus allowing new perspectives to emerge. And what is the role of co-determination and workers' representation for the sustainable corporate governance and supervisory board? First, I'm convinced that co-determination strengthens cohesion and culture within the company. We have to acknowledge that the necessary climate-related transition process increasingly affects the labor market and massively challenge regions, companies, and employees. Therefore, co-determination and workers' representation in corporate governance systems have an enormous importance to ensure solidarity within the company and contribute to social cohesion in times of structural change. This is why those who are most affected, the workers, need to be an active part in the transition or in the transformation process, helping to shape it through commitment and new ideas. And secondly, co-determination in relation or in combination with collective agreements result in greater fairness and guaranteeing economic and social participation, especially in times of transition. At the same time, employees can contribute an enormous innovation potential through co-determination. Supervisory boards, especially employees in supervisory boards and works councils, facilitate transition processes in companies and actively shape sustainable business strategies, site development, and education and qualification. Potential problems and obstacles can be avoided by taking the workers' perspective into account. They are the ones who deal with climate neutral innovation in the future on more or less a daily basis. Experiences show that co-determination in German companies have a much higher innovation potential, increased profitability, and positive influence on capital market performance. Co-determination companies are more competitive and lead to higher and more stable investments as well. As many studies show, workers' participation in supervisory boards is an instrument that leads to more sustainable corporate decisions. A study from 2019 shows that since the financial and economic crisis, companies with employee representatives on the supervisory board have outperformed firms without workers' board level representation. That applies to operating profits, capital market value, employment development, and investment in plant and in research. The so-called MB index, co-determination index established at the Science Center in Berlin, shows companies with strong workers' representation and participation are more likely to have a sustainable strategy, providing more training, offer higher level of job security, appointing more women to supervisory boards, integrate sustainability into to a greater extent into daily decisions, engage in more dialogue with stakeholders, and link executive compensation more frequently to sustainable targets. Workers' perspective is, as we all know, long-term oriented. Employees have a stronger interest in a resilient and sustainable company, especially in contrast to rather short-term oriented capital markets. Co-determination is an important corrective to short-termism of many shareholders who only hold stock for a very limited time. When you want to strengthen long-term oriented business decision, I think it will be necessary to strengthen co-determination and workers' voice. However, workers' board level representation will only be able to develop positive effects if the threat of erosion is prevented. The avoidance of workers' board level representation in Germany is unfortunately increasing. 1/3 of the companies that are over the minimum employment level that triggers workers' board level representation have managed to avoid co-determination. If we fail to intervene, young companies will completely evade corporate co-determination. To this end, to my opinion, it's absolutely essential that the loopholes for avoiding workers' board level representation will have in part been created by European company law, and we have to be carefully looking to European company law systems developments and making sure that workers' voice and co-determination will be implemented in future. Finally, let me give very few examples to underline my arguments by highlighting some experiences in companies which are really sustainable based on workers' commitment and workers' participation. It was last year. A works council from a large logistic company in the port of Hamburg reported how they had played a decisive role in promoting the climate-friendly electrification of the port of Hamburg, and how the workers' side on the supervisory board had stood up for the sustainable development of their location against the short-term economic views of the capital side. Another works council from a large solar technology corporation showed that they had helped to shape the restructuring of the company, which was affected by a so-called price war in socially acceptable way. They also referred to the economic innovation strengths of the employees, which is reflected in the special quality of the products, and thus counteracts the price war in the solar industry. Another example, together with the IG Metall and the company's management, the Works Council of a manufacturer of photovoltaic systems technologies implemented many measures to avoid carbon emission. They installed a bicycle rental system, purchased company bicycles, and promoted fuel-efficient company vehicles. In addition, a newly installed photovoltaic system makes production almost CO2 neutral. I could give many other examples, but only those few examples should prove that workers have an interest in the long-term perspective of companies, and co-determination is contributing, especially in times of structural changes. Thanks for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much for these very rich insights, which help a lot to tackle this perspective, if not unique, but rather from the special way the German governance system is set up. While we are almost running out of time, obviously I wouldn't like to lose the great opportunity to use our distinguished collected evidence and expertise here. And maybe in reverse order, I'd like to ask you one question, which is, what do you think is the most driving force for the transformation we are going to see? We see so many different input factors, be it regulation, customers, financial markets, employees. What do you think, if you had to single out the one most important one, which one would it be? Maybe in reverse order. Werner, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, I think our system of co-determination of workers' involvement gives the opportunity to bring together different interests which are entirely understandable, but bringing different interests together for a long-term company strategy by combating climate change and social justice.
May I also raise the same question to Joe Kaiser, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Well, I believe that the matter of co-determination, as I said earlier, if it's being done well, it's a very positive adder to the ESG, especially the social matters, because we can discuss controversial interest in a meaningful way. So I believe overall it's a very positive aspect. The only one thing sometimes where we need to help out together is that German representatives from the employee side get into conflict because they should actually be responsible for the global interest, yet they're being elected in Germany. So it's very hard sometimes to deal with that matter, but I'm a very big fan of working together and get the stuff done in an aligned way and set the priorities together, because at the end of the day, we are in the same boat.
Thank you. Yeah, please, Simone.
For me, I think that only the combination of all the different criteria you mentioned will bring success. We all have to be aware that planet's needs is on priority number one, and this must be proven by consumers, by employees, by management board, by investors, and so if all stakeholders have together this awareness of sustainability being our first issue, it should be on the right way.
Yeah, thank you very much. While obviously, and I apologize, so this is why I couldn't give justice to all the important questions and comments that came in the chat. I think all of them show that this is a topic that deserves much more and closer consideration. Thus, we take this also as, say, our starting impetus and inspiration for the future work that lies ahead of us. And with this, I'd like to hand over again to Dr. Werner Schnappauf for the closing words.
Excuse me, can I maybe ask one question just to clarify? There's a number of questions in the file. I see like 16 which are not answered. I saw there were a few for me. So shall we answer those questions online after the online session, or how do we go about it? Because people deserve an answer. They may not like it, but they deserve one.
If our distinguished speakers, Simone and Werner, have some more minutes available, then I would like to prolong a little bit our session. Simone, is it fine for you? Yes, I know that, Werner, you have another meeting at sharp at 6 o'clock, but maybe you can join for 5 or 10 minutes, because we want to have the chance to answer some of the questions in the chat. Okay, thank you, Simone and Werner. So, Jörg, I will hand back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving the additional flexibility here. So and let's start specifically about also the question that came up about ESG incentives in compensation for top management. And I think this question specifically goes to Simone and Joe with respect to how can it be implemented, to what cohort, which part of management could it apply?
Well, ideally you start from the top, which is the corporate board. But there should also be a senior management involvement. So what we have done with our compensation system is 1/3 is fixed, 1/3 is short term, and the other third is long term. And we put the ESG goals into the long term incentive because we believe, ESG is a longer term matter, not an annual topic. And we put social matters in there, like employee engagement. We put the environmental matter there, like reducing the CO2 footprint going forward on annual milestones. And on the governance side, we put the diversity in the forefront. So we have very clearly defined measurable targets, which apply to the board members and the top 100 senior managers. It's only 20% today of the total, but we are going to increase that going forward. The more we involve also scope 3 in the environmental, because you're only scope 1 and 2 so far, but at the end of the day, we need to go scope 3 also.
It is very similar at Henkel. So we introduced the ESG targets also in the remuneration of the management board last year on a more general level, and year after year we would like to specify and to make it more tangible. At Henkel, it is not especially part of the long term. It is part of the individual factor of each member of the management board, and therefore it is possible to really make a very clear link to the responsibility to the respective board member. And yeah, I think that's a special topic for Henkel, and the rest is comparable to what Joe said. It's more topic for the management board and to the senior leadership team than to every employee until today.
Then maybe I'll take the next question to Rainer Hofmann, which is a question that I think is evident, it's an important one, is the question of international competition. So what happens if some countries implement very strict rules, others don't? And also when you look, for example, at the labor representatives, maybe in different countries, how would you react to this specific challenge for German, but maybe also for companies in other countries in the world?
Yeah, first of all, I would be arguing to say, if I take my specific perspective, workers' involvement and co-determination into consideration, that those companies with strong participation systems are much more sustainable and much more competitive. And we have even decent empirical research which proves that those companies with a long-term strategy with workers' involvement are more profitable on the long run. But nevertheless, I would be very much in favor that we have always to see this from a European perspective, because as Europeans, we can be goal setters also in a global perspective. And therefore, I think that with the European companies, with workers' involvement system in European companies, we have made some steps forwards. If I take it as a special part from the participation perspective, European Works Councils can play a decent role. And by the end of the day, they are not only much more profitable, they're much more sustainable in their business strategies in matching different targets and being competitive in a global perspective.
Thank you. We have one more question, which goes probably more to Simone and Joe, which is that obviously we know of the different metrics each company needs to report on, be it in the financial reports and elsewhere. How can a reasonable and sustainable way of reporting on sustainability metrics be introduced? How it can be developed to satisfy these goals?
Simone, you want to start?
For me, this is really a complicated question, and I think it's not easy to answer this here tonight, because there are so many stakeholders, so many different interests of financial reports, and we, as I said, I think we need standardization, which then fits to most of the stakeholders, but it's really a complex situation.
Yeah, that is a very good question, obviously, because that matters to all international companies. There is a lot of activities going on, in my view, almost too many, but out of good, out of good intent. There are a few areas. One is the United Nations sustainability goals. That could be one area, because it's United Nations. The other one is the World Economic Forum has just put out a similar activity, which a lot of people are joining. I know that the European Roundtable is doing things too. No matter what comes out in the end, what we do need to have is a standardized way of reporting between the FASB and the IASB, because at the end of the day, no matter what we report, it's got to be audited. It's got to be audited. So once you've got an audit, you talk about audit standards, and you would want to have at least a minimum of assurance, at least a limited assurance, ideally the full assurance. Once you do that, there's got to be standards which are good for both the IASB, means IFRS, and US GAAP, because otherwise companies run into a million of different issues, which is not good, because then we lose sight for the content where we should put the emphasis to and talk about formalities, what's different between European and US reporting. That's very, very relevant. The good news is that the WEF has just brought the International Accounting Standard Board together with the FASB, and they are being tasked and have agreed now that they work out a common set of audit rules on how to audit the non-financial reporting on ESG. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Because I believe, this is relevant going forward out of the reasons we discussed, that there are sometimes, priorities to set between the financials and the non-financials, and they've got to be aligned in the way we report them and how we make quality assurance on the audit.
Thank you. So maybe, and again, I don't want to overstretch your time, as exciting and interesting I find this discussion. Ms. Hoffmann, I see you urge probably for an ending, but maybe can we start with you with the final question, which I would like to ask to each of you, which is, obviously this topic is so important that it deserves further consideration. How can we avoid that it's, and this is a provocative question in the chat, that it's simply done in a greenwashing way?
I think if it should not become a greenwashing method, I think we have common commitments. What we need also common rules. And if I talk about workers' involvement, especially with a European perspective, we can see that European company law is becoming more and more important. And my perspective would be the positive experiences, and there's a lot of empirical research on the added value of co-determination systems in Germany, should be also applied to the European Societas, the European company, and other forms of European company law. So this could become a strong European instrument in times of global challenges, where we have to make sure that employees and their interests are taken on board in the common interest of companies. I think there are a lot of common. We couldn't neglect differences, but with the system of co-determination, I think there is at least a path where we have a common ground to develop common perspective in times of radical changes, which we will be faced in the next 10 years due to climate change, technological innovations, and demographic challenges. We can do it only together, and therefore my plea is to strengthen workers' voice in a European context, and this makes us also more competitive in a global context. and apologize. I just have a meeting since 50 minutes with workers directors from the Bagel-Trah Foundation, where we are discussing similar issues, not today related to climate change, but looking forward to the elections in Germany in September, and what kind of improvements we are looking for to strengthen co-determination in the common interest of companies and workers in Germany as well as in Europe. Thanks very much for the invitation, and please excuse me that I have to leave now.
We thank you very much for taking the extra time. Thank you very much for this. But I would also like to give Simone and Joe the opportunity to maybe deal with this question of the greenwashing, but also any other aspect you find relevant to address.
Well, first of all, I mean, greenwashing, what you can do always is you kill it by facts. There's got to be factual evidence of measurable targets and need to be measurable. And there's got to be enough reliable transparency through an audit scheme where independent auditors really check on the facts and not so much on the quality of the color of PowerPoint versions. That's very relevant. And then you still may have people who, you know, like it or don't like it, but that's the way, you know, you base your discussion on facts. And this is really relevant because there are so many different interests there. We have a shareholder interest. We have a societal interest. There is activism on both sides, shareholders as well as environmental. Activists are typically not interested in solutions. They are only interested in diagnosis. So you need to, you know, but with the diagnostics, you're not going to change anything. So you need to change things. And this is what you know, need to do fact-based, and then we are okay. Because there is conflicts of priorities, jobs versus profitability versus planet B. So as Simone said, we need to prioritize on what we are here for. And at the end of the day, it is about societal value in a innovative and competitive way, because if we don't have the money to spend, we cannot execute on our social responsibility. We need to be financially strong in order to help the others, in order to do greater good for society. If we need help ourselves, it's meaningless to debate ESG. So that's what I said. We've got to be competitive and through innovation, preferably through innovation first, and then, you know, help the others to come along. But we must not confuse those priorities, otherwise it gets nowhere.
Yeah, my point of view is that large corporations have a big responsibility for the company, for the employees, their products, and so on. It is not their intention to do greenwashing, in my point of view. They have done so many things over many years to have a high reputation and to gain trust in the society and with the consumers. And then it's a very short-term orientation if you do some kind of greenwashing. I assume that most large corporations don't do that. They are audited by professional auditors, and facts and figures are the level which is audited. When it comes to the society, I think it becomes more and more difficult to do greenwashing because data are everywhere transparent, and it always comes back if you do some kind of greenwashing. If you take the huge scandal of automotive and diesel scandal and all the emissions, this was such a great reputational disaster. So I really hope this was something which was so bad that all the others know that greenwashing might only have a very short-term advantage, but will be a big disadvantage on the long term. So therefore, I'm very hopeful regarding that point. There will always be some smaller companies or even sometimes larger companies which fail, but for the big majority, I think this is true. They do not do greenwashing.
You bring out a good point, if I may, and that's, you know, I always call it ownership culture. And Simone is, like hardly anyone other speaks for, you know, family businesses. And family businesses can also be big, not just a small, medium. Think of Mittelstand, but what have you, but also big ones. So companies which are being owned by family, or at least co-owned, or have family has a major impact, you can be rest assured there is more for them than just a few numbers and a few reporting matters, because they've got the reputation to lose. And that counts much more than anything else. And so those companies like Henkel with Simone or others, which are in part at least family owned, are very, very relevant to bringing the message out in a credible way. Because many other corporations, they've got managers or CEOs who are nothing but employees. And that's a very different way of looking into a long-term reputational matter. And I've always said to my people, because obviously Siemens was also a big company with 400,000 people. And I said, look, no matter what you do, no matter who you are, no matter where you are at, just act as if that was your own company, and we will be fine. And you would not believe how powerful that is, because everybody, owns something. So they are owners of something, and they act if that was your own money, act if that was your own reputation. And that's very powerful. And that's, I think, is the approach also to such things like ESG, because at the end of the day, it is a reputational matter. And people don't stick out their head for the short term, if it's not long-term and sustainable. So thanks, Simone, because there could be nobody else than you to be, to let's say, talk about this credibility.
Thank you so much. Also from my side to both of you for basically taking also the extra time, providing your very rich, very insightful thoughts with us. Also the thoughts on the reputation building, the last one, which I find a very inspiring one. And now I would say now finally handing over to Werner Schnappauf. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Jörg. Let me also thank you, all of you, very, very much. Simone Bajaltra, Joe Käser, and in absence also Rainer Hoffmann, for your statements, for your commitments, and also for the vital discussion. Thank you so much. And coming back, Jörg, to one of the last questions, when the climate neutrality and sustainability is so important, why things goes forward so slowly. I think the momentum of sustainability is so strong nowadays. I never had the impression before. Now the momentum is strong and great for sustainability. And within this year, 2021, there will be 3 further key events to accelerate the process. We will see the COP26 in Glasgow, led by the G7, led by the UK this year, and also the G20 summit, led by Italy. Therefore, the sustainability, the climate neutrality issues will get accelerated more and more. And therefore, one of the key messages Simone and Joe and also Rainer brought to us is that we have to work together to fight this challenge. So thank you very, very much for this kickoff meeting of the German chapter of the Climate Governance Initiative. I want also to say thank you to the co-hosts, Katharina, Board Academy, and Jörg for the ESMT Berlin, and the audience and everybody. Let's stay in touch. Let's work together. Let's be at the forefront of change, at the forefront of transformation. Thank you, all the best, and hope to see you again as soon as possible.
Thank you, Werner. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.